She was arrested for voting. In a time when women had no voice, she refused to stay silent. She spent her life fighting for a right she would never see. Let's turn the clock back to the 1800s and discover the story of Susan B. Anthony. Susan B. Anthony was born on February 15, 1820, in Adams, Massachusetts. She was the second of 7 children, born to Daniel Anthony, a cotton mill owner, and Lucy Reed Anthony. But more important than where she was born was how she was raised. Susan's parents were Quakers, a religious group that believed in truth, equality, education, and social reform. They taught their children something powerful for that time. Boys and girls deserved the same opportunities. Susan took that lesson to heart early. She was a quick learner, reading and writing by the age of just 3. In 1826, the family moved to Battenville, New York, where Susan attended a local school. But one moment there would stay with her forever. Her teacher refused to teach her long division, simply because she was a girl. That was unacceptable to her father, so he pulled her out of school and opened a home school instead, not just for Susan and her siblings, but for other local children too. From the beginning, Susan learned this: if the system is unfair, you don't accept it, you change it. In 1830, Susan was sent to a Quaker boarding school in Philadelphia, but her education was cut short. In 1837, a financial crisis, known as the Panic of 1837, devastated the country and her family. Her father lost everything. The family home was gone. The Anthonys had to start over. They sold what they could, moved to more affordable living in New York, and the children, including Susan, had to help support the family. At just 19 years old, Susan became a teacher. She later taught at a Quaker school in New Rochelle, New York. The family took in boarders to survive, until, in 1840, a small inheritance allowed them to buy a farm in Rochester. This would become an important place in Susan's life and in the future of a movement. Interesting fact: the Panic of 1837. What caused the Panic of 1837? In the years leading up to it, the US economy was growing rapidly, but much of that growth was built on risky speculation, especially in Western land. Banks made the problem worse. They issued large amounts of paper money without having enough gold or silver to back it up. At one point, thousands of different banknotes were in circulation, many with very little real value behind them. Then, in 1836, President Andrew Jackson issued an order requiring that public land be purchased only with gold or silver. This sudden demand for hard currency put enormous pressure on banks, especially in the West. As banks ran out of gold and silver, people began to panic. They rushed to withdraw their money. This triggered a nationwide bank run. Many banks collapsed. At the same time, the United States had no central bank. Jackson had previously shut down the Second Bank of the United States, which might have helped stabilize the economy. The result? A severe economic crisis. Businesses failed, unemployment rose, and the country entered a deep depression that lasted into the mid-1840s. As a young woman, Susan had choices. She had suitors. She received marriage proposals. But she didn't want the expected life. She had something else in mind. Susan believed her life had a bigger purpose. When she began her work fighting for women's rights, she made a decision, one that was uncommon for her time. She chose not to marry. Not because she didn't value family, but because she knew the fight for equality would require all of her time, energy, and focus. And she was ready to give it. After leaving the Quaker seminary, Susan began her career as a teacher. In 1846, she accepted a position at the Canajoharie Academy in New York's Mohawk Valley. There she became headmistress of the female department, a major responsibility for a young woman at the time. She taught from 1846 to 1849, but it wasn't just teaching that shaped her future. It was what she discovered. At the academy, Susan noticed something deeply unfair. Male teachers were being paid far more than female teachers, even when they were doing the same work. That realization stayed with her. It planted a question that would grow into a lifelong mission. Why should women be treated as less than men? The numbers made the injustice impossible to ignore. As a teacher, Susan earned about $2.50 a month. Men earned $10 a month for the same work. Even after becoming headmistress, she earned $110 a year, while male headmasters made up to 4 times more. This wasn't just unfair, it was a system designed to keep women behind, and Susan saw it clearly. That experience changed her. It pushed her beyond teaching and towards something much bigger, a fight for equal pay, a fight for equal rights, a fight that would define her life. Soon, Susan would step beyond the classroom and into a growing movement that would change history. When Susan's family moved to Rochester, New York, in 1845, their home became something special. It wasn't just a farm, it became a gathering place for people who wanted to change the world. Abolitionists, those fighting to end slavery, met there often. Among them were powerful voices like Frederick Douglass, along with reformers such as Amy and Isaac Post, and others committed to justice and equality. Susan was growing up surrounded by these conversations, listening, learning, absorbing. Rochester would later become a center for reform movements and the place where Susan's voice would grow stronger. In 1848, the first Women's Rights Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York. It was a historic moment, but Susan wasn't there. She was still teaching and couldn't attend, though her parents and one of her sisters did. Even so, the ideas were already finding their way to her. By 1849, everything changed. Susan left her teaching position and returned home to help run the family farm. But this wasn't just about farming. It was the beginning of something bigger. The Antony farm was a busy 32-acre operation filled with fruit trees and berry bushes. Susan took charge. She managed the planting, the harvesting, and the sales. And while she worked, the farm continued to welcome reformers, thinkers, and activists. It became more than a home. It became a hub for change. Surrounded by abolitionists and drawn to the Temperance Movement, Susan began to find her voice. The quiet teacher was becoming something more. She was stepping into a life of activism. Soon, one meeting and one friendship would change everything. Interesting fact: the Abolitionist Movement. The Abolitionist Movement was a 19th century effort to end slavery in the United States, growing strongest between the 1830s and the Civil War. In 1807, Congress passed a law banning the importation of enslaved people, which took effect on January 1, 1808. But slavery itself continued. By 1833, the movement was gaining strength. In Philadelphia, about 60 activists founded the American Anti-Slavery Society, which became a major national force in the fight against slavery. In 1852, a book helped change hearts and minds. Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, exposed the cruelty of slavery to a wide audience. It sold over 300,000 copies in its first year, shifting public opinion in the North. Then came a turning point. On January 1, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. It declared that enslaved people in Confederate states in rebellion are, and henceforward shall be free. It also allowed black men to join the Union Army and Navy. Nearly 200,000 would serve. While it did not immediately free all enslaved people, it changed the direction of the war and gave hope to many. Finally, in 1865, the 13th Amendment was passed, officially abolishing slavery in the United States. In 1851, on a simple street in Seneca Falls, New York, 2 women met, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. They were introduced by a mutual friend. At the time, neither could have known just how important that moment would become. That meeting sparked a partnership that would last over 50 years, and together, they would help change history. They were very different, but perfectly matched. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was the writer. She crafted powerful speeches and bold ideas. Susan B. Anthony was the organizer. She traveled across the country, speaking, organizing, and bringing those ideas to life. Stanton stayed home more with family. Anthony traveled and spoke publicly. Together, they balanced each other perfectly. Together, they became a force, a voice for women who had none, a partnership built on trust, purpose, and determination. Today, a bronze statue in Seneca Falls, called When Anthony Met Stanton, honors that moment. But their real legacy wasn't a statue, it was a movement. Just 1 year later, in 1852, Susan faced another defining moment. She attended a temperance convention in Syracuse, New York, ready to speak. But she was stopped, told she could not speak simply because she was a woman. For many, that might have been the end. For Susan, it was just the beginning. She refused to accept no. Instead, she helped form the Women's New York State Temperance Society, an organization where women could finally have a voice. That moment changed everything. It pushed Susan further, from reform work into a lifelong fight for women's rights. She wasn't just supporting a cause anymore, she was becoming its leader. She was known for being persistent and fearless. She traveled constantly, often in difficult conditions. She believed deeply in fairness from a young age. And soon, Susan and Elizabeth would take their fight to an even bigger stage, one that would challenge the entire nation. Interesting fact: the Temperance Movement. The Temperance Movement began as an effort to reduce the harmful effects of alcohol on society. Supporters believed alcohol contributed to problems like poverty, domestic violence, workplace accidents, and corruption. Over time, the movement grew stronger. Organizations like the American Temperance Society, founded in 1826, helped spread the message. Later, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, WCTU, became a powerful force, not just for temperance, but also for women's rights and social reform. Activists used every tool they could: pamphlets, public speeches, and political lobbying to change public opinion. Eventually, their efforts led to a major national law. In 1919, the United States passed the 18th Amendment, banning the production, sale, and transportation of alcohol. This period became known as Prohibition, but the results were not what many had hoped. Illegal alcohol production, known as bootlegging, spread rapidly. Organized crime increased, and the government lost valuable tax revenue. By 1933, Prohibition was repealed. The temperance movement had a lasting impact, not only on laws, but on the growing role of women in reform movements across the country. During the Civil War, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton turned their focus to a different fight: the fight to end slavery. Together, they co-founded the Women's Loyal National League, and what they did next was extraordinary. They organized a massive petition campaign, gathering nearly 400,000 signatures. At the time, it was one of the largest petition efforts in American history. Their goal was clear: to push Congress to pass a constitutional amendment to abolish slavery. And their voices were heard. Senator Charles Sumner later credited the League as a driving force behind the movement. In 1865, the 13th Amendment was passed, finally abolishing slavery in the United States. It was a major victory. But for Susan, the fight for equality was far from over. Susan B. Anthony first worked closely with the anti-slavery movement. She learned organizing and public speaking there. That experience shaped her later fight for women's rights. After the war, the nation began to rebuild. New amendments were added to the Constitution. The 14th and 15th Amendments expanded rights, granting citizenship and voting rights to African American men. But there was a painful truth: women were still left out. Susan was deeply disappointed. Some believed this was a step forward, that progress for black men would eventually lead to progress for women. But Susan saw it differently. She believed that excluding women sent a dangerous message, that men were more deserving of rights. This disagreement caused a major split in the movement. In 1869, Susan and Elizabeth Cady Stanton founded the National Woman Suffrage Association. Both ladies were determined to fight directly for women's right to vote. A year earlier, they had already begun spreading their message in another way, through a weekly newspaper called The Revolution. Its mission was bold: to promote women's suffrage, equal pay, and labor rights. And its motto became unforgettable: men, their rights and nothing more. Women, their rights and nothing less. The movement had changed. It had grown stronger, more determined, and more divided. But Susan was ready. Susan B. Anthony's fight for equality took her across the country. She gave hundreds of speeches each year, often in places where she wasn't welcome. Crowds could be hostile, opposition was strong, but Susan never backed down. She refused to accept a system that denied women a voice. And in 1872, she decided to challenge it. Even though it was illegal for women to vote, Susan cast her ballot in the presidential election in Rochester, New York. It was an act of courage and defiance. Days later, she was arrested, taken from her own home. Her crime? Voting. The judge did not allow the jury to deliberate. She was found guilty and fined $100. That Susan refused to pay, and she never did. Her message was clear: if the law is unjust, it must be challenged. She argued the Constitution already gave her the right to vote. She gave a famous speech: "Is it a crime for a citizen of the United States to vote?" As the years passed, Susan's leadership only grew stronger. In 1890, she helped unite two rival suffrage groups into one powerful organization, the National American Woman Suffrage Association. Together, they became a stronger voice for change. From 1892 to 1900, Susan served as president of the organization, leading the movement forward with determination and purpose. She had spent decades fighting, traveling, speaking, organizing, never giving up. And though she would not live to see women win the right to vote, she had brought the nation closer than ever before. By the late 1800s, Susan B. Anthony's fight had grown far beyond the United States. At the age of 68, she took her message to the world. In 1888, she helped found the International Council of Women, an organization dedicated to advancing women's rights across the globe. Susan didn't just support the movement, she helped shape it. She traveled to Europe, worked to build international connections, and even chaired the organization's first meeting. Later, she was named its honorary president. Her voice, once heard in small meeting rooms, was now echoing across continents. Back home, another important moment arrived. In 1892, Elizabeth Cady Stanton stepped down as president of the National American Woman Suffrage Association. Susan B. Anthony took her place. Now she was leading the movement she had helped build. In 1893, she helped organize the World's Congress of Representative Women at the World's Fair in Chicago, a major gathering of women from around the world. She continued to travel internationally, to cities like London and Berlin, serving as head of the US delegation and strengthening the global fight for women's suffrage. By 1904, her impact was undeniable. She was named the first honorary president of the International Woman Suffrage Alliance. Susan had started as a teacher. Now, she was a global leader. Her fight was no longer just national, it was worldwide. By the time Susan B. Anthony reached her later years, she had spent decades fighting for one cause: equality. At the age of 80, she stepped down as president of the National American Woman Suffrage Association, passing leadership to Carrie Chapman Catt. The movement was in good hands, and closer than ever to victory. In 1906, Susan gave her final public speech in Washington, D.C. It was her birthday, her 86th. Standing before the crowd, after a lifetime of struggle, she left them with words that would echo through history. Failure is impossible. Just 1 month later, on March 13, 1906, Susan B. Anthony passed away in Rochester, New York. And in the final years of her life, Susan would leave behind a message, one that would echo long after she was gone. She never saw women win the right to vote. That moment would come 14 years later, but without her, it may never have come at all. Susan B. Anthony was gone, but her fight was not. For more than 60 years she had pushed, organized, and refused to give up. And yet, she knew she might not live to see victory. According to her obituary, she once said, "To think I have had more than 60 years of hard struggle for a little liberty, and then to die without it, seems so cruel." But history was already turning. In 1919, Congress passed the 19th Amendment, a law that would guarantee women the right to vote. Then came the final step. The states had to approve it. On August 18, 1920, Tennessee became the deciding vote, the 36th state to ratify the amendment. Just days later, on August 26, 1920, it became law. Women across the United States could finally vote. Today, that day is remembered as Women's Equality Day, and the amendment itself is often called the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, in honor of the woman who never gave up. She didn't live to see the victory, but she made it possible. To honor her, Susan B. Anthony was the first real woman, not symbolic, on U.S. currency. The Susan B. Anthony dollar was introduced in 1979. Susan B. Anthony didn't just fight for change. She helped create a future she would never see, but one the world would never forget. Coming up next, Jane Austen. Her stories feel so real because many of them were. Her words still resonate today. Step into the world behind her novels and the life that inspired them. If this story inspired you, join us as we continue uncovering the lives of women who changed the world. Subscribe to Heroines of History and keep the light of history alive. And let us know in the comments who your favorite heroine is. Bye for now.